Okay, you happen to be nearest to me. Okay.
At the cost of being a little bit repetitive from yesterday, the problem with Zambia's financial structure, if you like, is that the currency is terribly overvalued and the interest rate is terribly over high. As part of the same management trick, you pull money out of the economy with a high interest rate, and then you let the dollar strengthen, or the kwacha strengthen against the dollar. With the result that you can't invest in anything in Zambia as a Zambian. If you want to borrow money, you have to go and get it outside the country, where the interest rates are as low as 2 or 3 or 4%, not 35%, which they are inside the country. But if you're going to go outside, you call yourself a foreigner.
Because we're really short on time, if you could ask your question, because you did make this comment, as you said before, yesterday.
Well, I mean, I think it's important because he's describing a bad case of Dutch disease.
Which one?
The Zambian.
Yeah.
And, I mean, it's important to realize that there's nothing unique about it. I mean, when you have these commodity booms from nowhere, like the copper boom in Zambia, if you're not careful, you end up overvaluing yourself and having these gated communities and all the other things that go with it. That's all I'm saying. And what's more, one small thing, if we held this conference across the river here, it would cost the organisers about 2/3 of what it costs to have it here. And that is pure financial mismanagement. Thank you.
Thank you, that's a comment. If you don't mind, can we confine ourselves to questions rather than comments and make your questions short? I think that if you can respond, however, to that comment in some way, but we'll take another 2 questions before we do that. I'm going to take Zoe, because it's not fair to just take people from the front, and Darlene. Okay, Zoe?
A very quick question for Roman about if you could say something about the historic presence of Chinese in Johannesburg, but also to speak to the idea about Johannesburg as a modern city more historically as well. So the creation, this idea of Johannesburg as a modern city isn't a new idea. Thanks.
Gilbert and Hangwei, you said that in your shopping mall research, Zambia is supplying unprocessed foods and ShopRite's South Africa is supplying processed foods. Just a brief note on your methodology for making that statement.
Yeah, because it's not true.
Okay. So, do you want to answer those? Please, can you answer those questions first, and I'll see if we've got time for another round.
We can.
Do you want to start?
Okay.
Yeah, go on.
Thanks. On the methodology, the study was a case study, and we spent more than a month, not every day, but more than a month of fieldwork. Largely talking to thank you. Largely we talked to Zambia, Zambian government agents, because they are the custodians of investment, and they are the ones who gave us quite a lot of figures and also who is really participating. And then also talked to PACRA, that is patents companies agents, who basically register the companies in the country. And then we also talked to a number of Chinese firms and also a number of South African firms. So for South African firms, we spent some time for food specifically, a number of chain stores. We went to Food Lovers, we went to Pick and Pay, we went to ShopRite, and we talked to a number of people, including the big work to do the packing. And the argument was that a number of unprocessed foodstuffs, and we were able to see actually potatoes and some tomatoes coming from local farmers, but processed stuff was coming from South Africa. And yeah, from a number of shops. Specifically, if you go to East Park Mall near Windsor, you get these answers. That's what we found. Yes. In terms of those, Dr. Scott or Guy Scott, yes, we agree, but we agree with your comment on the value of the currents. But the question remains fundamental. We are having this kind of government, but we're investing little in getting everybody participating in the economy, especially the ordinary people. We have limited services, infrastructure services for water and energy coverage amongst poor people in the city is minimal. And that talks to the stance by government and perhaps the less of city government, but national government, because there's less decentralization in the country. So that remains a reality, but it has a solution. In terms of currency, participation of the locals and the interest rate, yes, that's a challenge. That also points to, and that makes people not get the livelihoods they need. Exactly, that I agree with.
Thank you, Zoe. I mean, your first question is a very long one, so I'll just point you to a couple of literature. Basically, very briefly, there have been about 4 waves of migration from the local South African born Chinese to the Taiwanese to the mainland Chinese. I mean, in terms of literature, you have Karen Harris, Daryl Lacone, Union Park. I mean, they've written a lot about it, and it would take quite a lot of time to go into this. So I'll just point you to the literature. With your other question, you're definitely right. I mean, your comment about modern city makes me think of Alan Patton's book, Cry the Beloved Country, where Johannesburg is always already seen as a sparkling kind of city. It's just what I find interesting is that how you try to maintain it. I mean, if you go through the master plan of the company and the narrative of the provincial government and the city of Joburg government, it's more trying to maintain its position as a modern city. And I think the actors that are involved might change a little bit. And one of the things that I find interesting that goes with your comment of the modern city is how you reuse iconic landmarks, such as the Telkom Tower, for instance, which was built during apartheid times and got a completely different significance afterwards. So it's kind of like a continuation in that attempt to stay modern and at the edge and have this globalized image of a modern city.
We did start a little late with this panel, so I think it's fair enough to take at least another round of questions. There were hands up before. Over here, this over here, one.
Yes, a question for Jamie a question for the TAZARA paper. In what sense turn to the east, particularly the way we forget the dry port is drying up, and so in what sense is this a turn eastward?
David?
Thanks, yeah. Fascinating series of papers, and great to have a whole morning devoted to urban issues. And I think what comes out clearly in the diversity across the papers is the urban dynamism, and crucially the way in which urban development and redevelopment is embedded within these wider politico-economic relations that we're exploring throughout the conference. And I think in different ways that comes out very clearly. But one of the things that is slightly puzzling, and in different ways in different of the papers, is that we don't learn anything at the moment about, as it were, the terms of the deals that constitute these sort of mega projects, these elite projects, assemblages, whatever they're being called by the different authors. And that seems to be crucial, because apart from anything else, it tells us, or would tell us if we could get that level of detail, where the drivers are. Or put very simply, are these being invoked by Zambian and Mozambican and other Southern African elites in terms of imitating kind of global imaginaries and all this idea of, you know, everywhere is a world-class city with world-class facilities for world-class elites and sod the rest? Or is it actually Chinese and South African and other external capital selling these projects because that's what they're good at building, based on their experience in China, South Africa, Brazil, and wherever? And Fritz's paper about the Brazilian one was interesting because it's about soft power, but that's also important. And it was interesting that the word sustainability, which is surely what urbanism and urbanization increasingly needs to be about, was mentioned just once in passing by one person this morning, and that was Gilbert. So ultimately, the question is, how do all these totally unsustainable images, imaginaries that get concretized, pun intentional, actually play back to sustainable urban and national futures?
Thank you. There's one more question over here.
Another question for Jimmy Monson, just a very short one. The Benguela Railway was opened this year, and I'm just interested whether the porters in Kapiri and Proshi see maybe a future for them in this turn to the west, because through Katanga, Zambia is again linked up with an ocean.
Thanks very much. So there's two questions here for Jamie, and one more broadly for the panel. I didn't have to finish on that. So, but yes, James got the.
Okay, thanks. So I'll answer the first question, turn to the east. I will say my title is partly the result of bullying from Lynchmore, which we talked about yesterday. So the dry port is bringing in mostly wheat flour, and a lot of this is coming from East Africa, from Kenya, Azam flour, for example. And the fertilizers are coming, a lot of the fertilizer imports I've been seeing now are coming from Europe, or European consigners. So the turn to the east is happening on the platform, and that's really over the last 10 to 15 years. These products that are coming from the Indian Ocean, the majority, as I said, of these products are Chinese. China, Singapore, Pakistan, Thailand. Thailand is another source of really large-scale shipments of rice that's going up to Katanga. So the dry port also has imports coming from the east. So that's really what I'm talking about in the sense that commodities that might have come from other sources. But just generally, the parcels trade and the commodities trade has expanded in the luggage wagons as a result of the shifts in less expensive commodity imports and small-scale trade. But I'm not really working with traders. I'm working with labor. And about the Benguela Railway, I mean, there are lots of new railway projects that are going to be really exciting. I'm not so familiar with what outcomes might come with the Benguela Railway, but another interesting link is the Nacala corridor. And the Chinese just came right while I was there. They're just about to start building the link from Chipata, and it's going to link up with TAZARA. And there's a lot of politics around TAZARA, and there's a lot of excitement that they're going to be independent from Tanzania, and that's been a tense relationship around the railway. So porters are excited that when those politics aren't there, and they're working through Mozambique, they could have more productive development of railway transport.
Okay, thanks so much. I wonder if we could just go along the panel. I'd really quickly give you each about 30 seconds or so, just sort of on the sustainability. If you don't think you've got anything to say on it, don't worry. But is there anybody? I'll change that. Bad move. Is there anybody here who specifically wants to answer the sustainability question? Yes. Oh, right. There's 3 people. So we start here and move along. If that's all right. Oh, you've got the microphone.
So very briefly to the question of sustainability and who's driving the deals. The city of Joburg and the province of Gauteng are in a bit of infights who's running the project, because the Shanghai company Shanghai is a municipality with a provincial status, so the province claims it's our project and they want to build from scratch. They want to break away from the urban past with highly problematic kind of attitude in terms of social cohesion and sustainability, whereas the city of Joburg tries to build within the existing urban environment and trying to make it more cohesive. So that's basically very briefly from the South African perspective.
Okay, I think I do agree with you that most of these initiatives are primarily driven from outside, and perhaps with a few influence of the municipal elite. If you take the case of Maputo, for example, if you look at most of the initiatives that the city has had with Brazilian counterparts, they've been driven by a few political heads, especially the mayor. When they go to the meetings, say at the UCLG, they strike some kind of a partnership. And once the mayor is out of the picture, there is some political change. Then most of these initiatives, because they are not really institutionalized, they fall apart. So I think that that's part of the problem I try to raise, that especially if these partnerships, they don't bring in a civil society component, which can help to bring the broader society in these initiatives.
This is not perhaps directly related, but I want to say something about sustainability, and that is that railway authorities and clearing agents rely very heavily on the sustainability of porter associations. If there aren't people that are healthy, organized, trustworthy, and known to move those goods, it's a problem. So actually TAZARA has all kinds of ways to try to sustain borders even when goods aren't moving, at the same time that borders themselves are mobilizing their associations. So I think this issue of labor is really critical, and different forms of labor, not just the unionized labor, which I could talk about for a long time, but these kinds of workers are part of the picture that we often miss.
Sustainability is a lovely apolitical word. Who could be against sustainability? I think the Sustainable Development Goals are going to be something which would help frame and drive a lot of research and a lot of work which is done in coming years. But I don't think they're necessarily going to lead to kind of a renegotiation of how we think about development. So sustainability has been around for a long time. I don't think it's a particular panacea. I think it's just as likely to be something which people are being very critical of in 10 years' time. I don't see sustainability as a kind of panacea for growth.
Thank you. Regarding the details of the contracts, I think we would appreciate that Zambia is still a closed society in terms of information flow from the state to the citizens. It's really difficult to get the details of the contracts. That's one. The second, for South Africa, it's much easier because private sector and the details will be found. But for Chinese investments, so it's also really difficult to get actual details. We tried very much. So that remains a challenge, but we're building networks to get the actual details. Then in terms of sustainability, we look at it from two perspectives. One is the location of these mega developments. Like we are showing the Mash development is about 60 kilometers away from the CBD. And that's taking huge valuable natural land and also perhaps agricultural land. And going forward, you're actually shifting the built environment from where it is to some total new area. And I disagree with the state when they say there's no land in the south. There's a lot of land, but there's inefficiency in the way we use land. And then we are going to those new frontiers, which is a challenge. Then second, in terms of sustainability of infrastructure, we don't have a plan on, I think as a country, on how would we ongoing or going forward, how do we manage the infrastructure we are putting forward, or that we are developing, especially government-initiated infrastructure. We saw at some point the infrastructure was almost, it was terrible. We used to have the deterioration, and because there was no ongoing management and improvement, and we have these airports, we have the stadium. If we don't manage it, we still have a challenge going forward. So I don't think we have a plan for that as a country, and that's a big challenge. Expensive as they may be, and also the fact that they also may be built on loans. So they may be actually looking at a future which may not be as good in terms of managing these and making them make a difference for the country and also for the citizens. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much, everybody. I'm sure you're all dying to get off to lunch. Okay.